Brian spent most of his adult life connected to the wrestling industry and became the most powerful promoter in Europe from the late 1980s. Brian George Dixon was born on the 24th of November, 1947, and from an early age took an interest in professional wrestling. Initially, he would attend shows in his home city of Liverpool, where he would go on to write reviews, many of which were published in wrestling magazines. Brian's first involvement in wrestling was as a second and then referee, which put him in contact with the wrestlers, resulting in him running a number of fan clubs, most notably the Jim Breaks fan club and the A2Z Wrestling fan club. In October 1970, Brian decided that he not only wanted to work on the shows, but to promote them, and so he founded Wrestling Enterprises, based in Birkenhead. As a young promoter, it wasn't easy, and Brian found himself promoting shows in local halls around the north of England. Brian was literally a one-man band. He did everything from booking the venues, the wrestlers, newspaper advertising, putting the ring up, and most importantly, taking the money from the paying fans. He was also one of the first promoters to sell merchandise at shows to earn extra income, and this proved really popular. His reputation soon grew, and it was not long before his shows were being noticed, not only by fans, but by many of the well-known wrestlers as well, who went to work for him. Brian began running more and more shows, and, unlike joint promotions, was a stage for the female grapplers to play their trade, with his wife Mitzi topping the bill on many occasions. As wrestling entered the 1980s, it was going to see the biggest change in the business for decades. Brian had become the top independent promoter in the country and was serious competition to joint promotions, something not seen since the 1960s when Paul Lincoln promoted shows. As a result of this, a number of top talent jumped ship and joined him, such as Wayne Bridges, John Quinn, Mark Rocco, Tony St. Clair, Kendo Nagasaki, Johnny Kincaid, Bobby Barnes, Adrian Street, Jim Breaks, and Johnny Saint. Brian changed the name of the company to All Star Promotions and started putting on shows nationwide, including at a number of venues which had been run solely by joint promotions for decades. He secured a contract running shows on the holiday camps, most notably Butlin's, bringing his wrestlers to a whole new audience who were there on their holidays. In 1985, Brian secured a contract with Screen Sport, one of the leading sports channels on satellite TV, at the time bringing his wrestlers to an even wider audience. However, bigger things were to come. In September 1985, ITV axed World of Sport and Wrestling got its own standalone slot on the channel. With joint promotions contract to screen televised wrestling coming up for renewal, Brian seized the opportunity and had a meeting with Mike Archer at ITV, which resulted in him and the WWF being given a slice of the main network wrestling show. Brian's first show was broadcast on ITV on the 3rd January 1987 from the London Hippodrome, which saw Fuji Yamada face John Wilkie, Mark Rocco face Frank Cullen, and the return of Kendo Nagasaki against Clive Myers in a ladder match. Whilst the final match didn't go as planned, it didn't really matter, as Brian had made it. He was now on a par with joint promotions. Throughout 1987, business was booming. Brian's shows were selling out across the country, and in April of that year, he achieved another first when he persuaded London City Council to overturn the ban of female wrestling in the capital and promoted a show at the Royal Albert Hall. The main event saw his wife Mitzi in tag team action in her final bout before retirement. In 1988, Brian and the entire wrestling industry were dealt a huge blow when ITV axed the weekly wrestling slot. Brian's last ITV show was broadcast from Bedworth on the 26th November and saw Steve Adonis face Sandy Scott in a tag match where Skull Murphy and Johnny South faced Marty Jones and Steve Taylor. After 2 years, Brian's stint on ITV was over, but this did not deter him, and he carried on regardless. Many wrestlers who had been contracted to joint promotions were now wrestling for Brian, and he continued to tour the country, putting on bouts such as Bridges vs. Quinn, Jones vs. Rocco, Finlay vs. Collins, Saint vs. Jordan, and Nagasaki vs. Haystacks, to name but a few. Brian also promoted the very first available videocassette, the Mick McManus World of Wrestling, which proved hugely popular. As the 2000s arrived, wrestling started to go into a steady decline. Many of the top TV wrestlers had hung up their boots, and without a shop window to promote new up-and-coming talent, it made it harder to get fans into the shows. Brian decided that, after seeing the success of the WWE at the time, he would reinvent his shows to appeal to a younger audience. Many matches became one fall, and he brought over to the UK wrestlers previously known for their stint in WWE rings. Certainly ensured that the business continued, and whilst the number of shows across the country were reduced, he and All Star Promotions still ran a number of long-standing wrestling venues. Brian was by now the top wrestling promoter in Europe, but by 2015, the business had changed from the one he set out back in the 1970s. There were now more promoters in the UK than ever before, which meant more shows and more competition, but Brian had built a legacy in wrestling that was respected by many, and, although slowing down in the last few years of his life, he remained at the helm of All Star Promotions. Although it was known that Brian had been suffering from health issues, it was nevertheless a great shock when, on the 27th of May 2023, he passed away. His death was a sad day for professional wrestling, marking a time in which wrestling in the UK might never be the same. Every top wrestler in the UK to appear in his rings, who would have thought that was possible when he started out promoting shows in Liverpool over 50 years ago. Brian Dixon will go down in history as one of the all-time great UK promoters. He took his business to the very top, steered it through the bad times, and came out the other side with his head held high and left a promotion that his family can be proud of.